May is Mental Health Awareness Month, and we here at Tip That Scale would be remiss if we did not acknowledge and recognize it and give you tangible takeaways, which we always strive to do. In this episode, we're talking to Amy Reedman, a wellness coach and consultant who helps individuals embrace and create a practice of self-care, mindfulness, and making a choice to be in the present, even in the midst of chaos and stress. And we all need that. So sit back, take a breath, and enjoy our conversation with Amy. Amy, it is so great to have you here on the podcast with us today. We have a long history, and it is wrapped around wellness. And a lot of the reasons why I wanted you on the podcast is because it is Mental Health Awareness Month. There's a lot of things going on, and I know that you can just shed some light and help folks through, especially me, help folks through how to navigate some of the challenges that we're seeing in our communities, in the world. We're coming off of a global pandemic, and I'm going to always talk about the pandemic because it's just part of the imprint of who we are now. And just, talk to you about what we can do to take better care of ourselves as we acknowledge the month that we're in. So would you mind introducing yourself, please?
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, I'm excited to be here. I think this is a really important topic, so I'm glad we're connecting about this. I'm a wellness coach and consultant. So for the last 22 years, I've been working with essential oils as an aromatherapist. Much of that is based on mental health, using essential oils to calm the nervous system and activate that parasympathetic nervous system, stepping out of the fight or flight state. And then along with aromatherapy, I incorporated yoga, and I specialize, while I teach hatha yoga, which is sort of the most maybe common yoga. I also incorporate yin yoga and restorative yoga in particular, which is all about calming the nervous system and exploring the trauma that can be like the physical results of trauma that is stored in the tissues in the body. You may have heard of the term issues in the tissues. That is what is explored in those modalities, particularly in restorative yoga. And I incorporate TRE, which is trauma release exercises. And the principles of TRE are, when we think about our animal kingdom, they shake it off. My dog is shaking right this second, and they shake it off whenever they've even just transition, not even when they've experienced some form of crisis, but just when they're getting up to walk into the other room, they shake it off on a regular basis. So that's something that is a really powerful tool. So the combination of aromatherapy, yoga, and then of course, mindfulness has become a really rooted practice in my life. All of the tools that I use incorporate being really mindful, which the word mindfulness really means being aware and just coming back to the present moment. So another way of saying what I do is any tool that brings us back to the present moment, which is usually through the breath, but not always, I'm on board with. So we can incorporate that through food. We can incorporate that through the view. We can incorporate that with a hand squeeze. We can incorporate that with a full breath. So that's the essence of what I do. And I moved last year as a result, for sure, of the pandemic. I had a brick and mortar space, and I closed the brick and mortar space. It was an aromatherapy blending bar with a learning lounge for workshops and classes and a wellness room for services. And I closed the brick and mortar, and then I ended up selling my condo and moving to Vancouver Island in British Columbia. So I've been through a big transition with all of this, as well as everybody else who's here. That's a little taste about me, and I'm glad to be here. So thanks for having me.
I'm going to say, first of all, I look at you as a wellness guru. Normally, I don't like to talk about how I know people, but I think it's important since we are talking about wellness. You and I met because of, that I love everything that you do. So I love yoga and I love aromatherapy. Amy was selling me a lot of aromatherapy oils. That's how we started to know each other. That's how we became friends. you are in Canada. And so we know each other because I used to live in beautiful British Columbia. I want to start by asking, as we think about Mental Health Awareness Month, how do you, granted, this is your work too, but how do you manage your mental health through wellness?
Yes, I love that you specifically chose the word manage, because I think that one of the things that we hear a lot about is, work-life balance and so on. And it sounds a bit like an achievement. And that's not my experience at all. At all. It's more like, my wellness, my lack of wellness at times, the imbalance of my wellness, and how I feel. Let's just simple, like how I feel in the moment completely changes thought by thought,
Mhm.
moment to moment, second to second. So the way that I address mental illness or unwellness is, as soon as I recognize that I'm off track, as soon as I recognize that I've lost or disconnected from myself, from my breath, from my body, which is expected and normal, and that's part of the human experience. There's no staying in the present moment. The present moment doesn't stay. We
Mhm.
can't stay in the present moment because that one's over. We have to start a fresh one every moment. Have to slash get to, depending on the the moment. And so to recognize when we are off track or when we feel disconnected is such an important awareness. And so instead of trying to stay present or trying to stay calm, my practice is to instead know how to come back
Mm,
and remind myself that I have the skills and I have the tools. I am capable of coming back to the present moment. And really it comes back to breath. So what is one thing that aromatherapy, yoga, and mindfulness meditation have in common? They all come back to the breath. I can't
mm,
smell a flower or an essential oil or cut up an orange for that matter and
mm.
not go, mm. And that moment is, I am present in the moment.
Yeah.
And so that's the biggest thing, is it's not about staying present or staying calm. It's about having a tool that brings me back to the present moment, which activates the parasympathetic nervous system, takes me out of the sympathetic nervous system, the stress state known as the fight or flight or freeze or fawn state, and tuning into that moment of, in this moment, I'm kind of sort of okay-ish. Even with all of this and all of that that's
Yeah.
happening, I'm sitting, standing, or laying down. I'm being breathed by my breath. I don't even need to do breathing. I'm being breathed by my breath. And that is where I then can, that's when I reclaim my sanity, I think I'll say. That's when
Oh,
we
I
can
like
think
that.
clearly. That's when we can research what we need to research. That's when we can think about the future productively. Otherwise, the nervous system is in this total fight or flight where we literally, the lizard brain thinks that we are being chased by a wild animal, so it will fight or flight for us to get the heck out of the situation instead of actually addressing what it is. So we need to get calm first, and the
Mm,
breath is the way home to do that. But I'll take it a step farther and say the breath brings me to my body.
mm,
So what if I'm hyperventilating? The breath isn't going to calm me. Okay, I got that. So I'm going to put my hands on my body, at least put my awareness on my body. If it's available to put my hands on my body, I'll do that. Help you. And I just notice my physical body is right here. This is the present moment. And that is when I can then think clearly once again.
Going back to your body and just getting in touch with your body. I was talking to a neighbor the other day. It just so happened that I stopped by her house right at the time she needed me to stop by her house. We all know how these things happen, but just go with it. If the feeling comes up, the feeling is there for a reason. Talking her through some things, and I gave her a hug and she hugged me. And it was interesting as you were talking about the body. I was thinking about how a hug and why hugs are so important. And sometimes people don't like to be hugged, and I get that. But it does remind you that you're a whole person, that you are there. And when someone hugs you, you can feel it. all over, whether their hand is on your shoulder or on your waist or whatever. It brings you back to your whole person. That's how it is for me. A good hug, especially, I can feel it from the top of my head to the bottom of my feet. So I love that you said that, just coming back to your body, even when you're hyperventilating. And I don't know if anyone has ever done that, but to be in that space is challenging. You're trying to claw out of it when it's just hard to do.
Yeah, so hard to do. And I think I want to really just come back to that. Everything that I'm going to share today is not easy and is quite simple. So I think the way to remember that is, like, what helps me is and I know anxiety and depression very well personally. So I come by this stuff honestly. I know panic attacks, and whatever is happening in the moment when I'm really feeling not okay is to first know that it's natural for me to resist anything that's going to calm me down. So that's an important thing. Like, we are not crazy when we are stressed and frantic and overwhelmed and in that state, and someone in a lovely, well-meaning way says, you just need to relax, you need to breathe. I am breathing, I'm relaxed. It's not, again, it's literally the part of the brain that is activated. It is a life or death threat. That is how the nervous system works. So just knowing I resist everything that could potentially calm me down right now, I don't think it's safe to do that, is natural, healthy, and normal. And then from that awareness, we literally look around. Am I safe right now? We literally look around your physical space. Am I safe right now? If I'm being chased by a bear, nope, not the time. If I'm driving, I need to pull over if I'm having that panic attack so that I can address the situation. So if there's a fire, I need to address that situation. So the body's working for us, not against us. So when that natural reaction happens, that is when we notice, oh, I'm freaking out. I don't want to calm down because I think there's something to freak out about. That's literally what's happening. So looking around the room, am I safe just for right now? Not for in 5 minutes, but for just right now, to pause and connect with my body and connect with my breath. And that is how we can get out of that. Because a lot of us go, I can't. Or I'll see people, they grab their aromatherapy bottle and they sniff it and then keep running. And I'm like, okay, whoa. We've really got to pause. But it's natural and normal to resist the process because that part of the brain is frantic and is trying to save our life.
Another thing you mentioned is that the nervous system is the system. It's working. And sometimes we know there are, and we talk about this quite a bit just because of the nature of the content on the podcast about the job market and work and all of the above. Sometimes those systems don't always work in our favor, and we have to find ways to get the system to work for us. Yeah.
I love that. I keep coming back to that with the nervous system. Stress, I actually have a webinar all about that. Stress actually isn't a problem. It's how we address stress that can be a problem. So, and we as a culture, certainly in the West, have been taught that stress is bad. No, stress for no reason that's not being managed can be destructive for sure. But the stress state is extremely healthy, and it's a message for us to recognize the systems in place. If there's a fire, I got you. If there's a bear chasing you, I got you. I'm clearly from Canada. I use the bear example.
Right.
Bears, however, although I've seen many, they're not chasing us, but moving right along.
They're actually kind of cute, those babies, if they're far from a distance. They're really adorable.
So cute. And when we see the baby, we know that mama's around. Right. And mama will take care of business. Mama is like the way that a mama bear responds to her babies is how the stress state, the sympathetic nervous system, is responding for us. It's taking
Mm,
care of us. And so when we recognize, oh, there's a big difference between there's a fire, I need to get out of the situation, and the fire is out, but the brain didn't get the message. So the amygdala in the brain thinks there's still a fire. It's still sending out those messages. And that is the result of trauma. Trauma is like the hangover, it's the result of crisis. And so that is why we can use these tools to come back to the present moment. And that's why it's important that we pause and actually, we're not trying to trick the brain. We're actually going, am I safe right now?
mhm.
To calm, and then we can get on track with the brain again, because the system's in place to take care of us and it works.
Yeah, we have to take an assessment.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes.
So there's a lot of people that don't necessarily have a reference point of what that is. From the time they were born all the way up until wherever they're at right now in their current life, they don't know what that sense of calm is. So generally, when you don't have a reference point to revert back to, it's very difficult for you to achieve that type of situation or feeling. What kind of recommendations or advice do you have for those types of people?
That's a brilliant question. I would ask in this moment, I mean, even your listeners, let's just take a moment and just consider a time that you felt calm, clear, and capable. Those are the three words. A time that you felt calm, clear, and capable. Maybe that's because you just had a great date and you feel confident. It doesn't necessarily need to be when your career was stellar, when all your relationships were going really well. It can be a glimpse. It can be a really, maybe you just did a great presentation. Maybe you thought, maybe I could actually move before the mind jumped in and said, no, 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 and all the thoughts. So we can really use the imagination. And if we don't have a memory, we can use the imagination to create, just imagine for a moment what it would feel like to feel how you want to feel,
Mm,
to feel how you want to feel. And even to ask that question requires presence, because if we're being chased by a bear or if there's a fire, we don't have time to get creative. Close your eyes, friends, and imagine being calm and clear. The reaction is going to be, I don't have time, lady, back off. I'm talking real life here. And so know that that is a normal and healthy response. And then when you literally have a moment or more to just sit or stand or lay down, connect with your body. Might feel nice to place a hand on the tummy, a hand on the chest, connect with your breath, and think of a time that you experienced feeling some level of calm, some level of clear, some level of capable. And what happens is, by just imagining it and being with the imagination, the physical body begins to respond as if it's real. And that's why the imagination thinks there's a fire when there's no fire. So the imagination is not a woo-woo thing. It's exactly, the mind is not living in reality, which is that I'm sitting in a room right now, having a conversation. In this moment, I'm not at threat. Even if the mind is like, yeah, but where's my rent money? Yeah, but how am I going to achieve this? How am I going to do this? Yeah, okay, for right now, I don't have time. So that's the thing. We pause. We don't ask, how am I doing in life? Am I calm to pause? No, 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 no. Those are like way huge questions. So instead, we just ask, in this moment, connect with the body, connect with the breath. Have I ever experienced feeling clear, calm, and capable? And then meet ourselves there and use that imagination to then bring us to a place of what that feels like. And that in itself, the cells in the body respond to that.
So, Amy, you mentioned something a little while ago where you were referring to, I guess, the mindset of the people in the West. And you're absolutely right. I mean, I've spent a lot of time out in the East, out in India, other parts of the Himalayas. They have far less than what we do. But it's almost like they can't be shook. I mean, they deal with problems on a daily basis, but they're always calm and collected. And yeah, there is the one offset that, you might see somebody frantically running around and panicking and freaking out, but that's a real problem for them. It's almost like here in the West, we create our own instances and our own problems, and then we want to live in this constant state of chaos.
Yeah.
Why do you think that is? Is it because we've been indoctrinated since we were kids to say if you're not doing something, then you're going to be constantly you're failing? What do you think it is?
Capitalism. I'm sorry, Amy. I'm sorry. I just
No, I
needed
love
to
it.
throw that in there.
Yeah, I think it's really layered. I think that, I mean, research shows that I believe it's still 95 to 99%, it might be up to 99% of our thoughts are subconscious. So what that means is 95 to 99% of the thoughts that I'm having in this moment are not actually authentic thoughts and even responses to your question, for example, that I'm thinking of based on my present moment reality. There's a 1 to 4% or 5% chance in there that you're actually getting that from me. So what that means is we are responding to the subconscious mind, which is what we were raised with, what culture tells us, all of the billboards that we see. We are a sponge. We are absorbing all of this, the news, the this, the that. I mean, how many times do we just hear this could happen? It could also not happen, but thank you, news programs. So we are responding to the coulds and the mights and the maybes, and we're always bombarded with information that is there to protect us, again, to activate that sympathetic nervous system if stress occurs. However, what's happened is it's increased that so that many of us live in that chronic state of the sympathetic nervous system, of the stress state.
You think about the differences between how people live in the East.
Yes.
They've learned to kind of accept where they're at and live in the moment, just like you were talking about. Just 4 years ago, I was in India, just walking around in the streets. It's packed, it's busy, and those people can't be bothered. And I don't mean in a way of like, oh, there's somebody coming to like stab me. No, they just kind of they flow. And here it's a constant state of chaos. I got to get to somewhere. I got to go do this. I have to do that. And when you talk to people, I still have family over there. And, even when I have issues or hell, when I got laid off, I was in a state of panic. I was like, what am I going to do? What's this? What's that? And they're like, you've got a bunch of first world problems. You don't really know what a problem is. And I was like, yeah, you're right. You guys have to worry about all kinds of different things. And you still you're at this state of, I can't be bothered with all the craziness.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's really important for us to, like in my coaching practice, one of the exercises that I do a lot with people is to just pause and explore what is the most meaningful to you in your life. What are the moments in your life, in your day even, that you really value? What I've noticed is that most people, it's the simple things. It's the walk, it's the hug, it's the morning coffee. It's not the fact that they feel joy when they see their car because it's fancy. Those are not the things people talk about. It's feelings. It's feelings. One of the things that I come back to is we're not afraid of what's going to happen. We're afraid of what we're going to feel. So when we recognize what we're afraid of feeling, and we notice that we're capable of feeling that, we felt it before, which is evidence, because we don't think it's possible in the moment, we feel capable of feeling it again. Also with that, we can recognize what are we afraid of feeling, and then what are we wanting to feel, or what do we get fulfillment from? And then those two feelings, we can use those to really change our reality, the way that we live, to meet up with those, so that we don't need to live in the chronic state of I need, I don't have. And that resistance to fear and emotions that we don't believe ourselves to be capable of feeling, which of course we are, and the clinging to everything that we think we need, that we have, that we can't give up, and so on.
I can relate to that. And the reason is I don't tell a lot of people this, but I'm a practitioner of like Vedic astrology. I went through a really weird stage in my life back in like 2014, 2015, to the point where, like I mentioned earlier, that I spent some time in the Himalayas. I was in an ashram for 6 months. And my guru that I still talk to this day, this guy is crazy. And I don't mean crazy in a hoo-ha kind of sense, but like, I don't know how he knows I'm going through something from way over there, but he knows and he calls me right at my weirdest state. But that's when I started learning about Vedic astrology and really taking a deep dive into the Vedas and the part of spirituality. And when I start looking at certain things that society's kind of put in front of us right now, it's telling us who we should be versus what we think we want to be. I think that's what causes a lot of those issues. I'm not going to say I'm an expert, but I do pay quite heavy attention to my environment, what's happening around me, and, the sense of chaos and the turmoil that we see. It gets to the best of us. Like just recently when we went through the playoffs, I mean, Nicole saw it firsthand. I was visibly shook. I was like, man, I was doing such a great job. Like, how would you get rid of me? Like I completely changed the entire landscape of what you guys had and made it an environment of like acceptance for everybody. And then all of a sudden I'm the one out the door, like what? And then I started realizing it wasn't really about me. It was just about like I just maybe didn't fit within that environment. And so it's part of what everybody else is really going through is like right now, and I think it was brought to the forefront during the pandemic because people got to internalize a lot of what was happening around them, and they couldn't be around a lot of those weird do this because you got to go to this and do that because you got to go to that. It was more about like self-reflection, and a lot of it drove people like I can't do this because they didn't know how. The funny thing was during the pandemic, I was completely fine. I didn't care. I was like, all right, cool. I can't go into the grocery store I don't want to anyways. Like, bring it to me. That kind
That's
of thing.
relatable, my friend. Can I just hide out at home? Are you kidding me? This is great. I had moments of that, definitely. And I think most people did. And I think a lot of us also struggled with the shoulds and the can'ts and the rules and hearing about the news and all of that. I love that you brought that up about your experience in India and the ashram, because I just did my very first 10-day silent Vipassana meditation retreat. And talk about being, I say silent, it was not silent in my head, let me tell you. But the result of it was so profound, beyond words that I can put into. And I'm absolutely still integrating from that. Now, I'm not suggesting that everybody go and just sit in a cushion and, for 10 days. I promise if you're thinking about it, maybe give me a call. Let's have coffee first because it's quite an experience. But what I am suggesting is just learning to be with ourselves when we're experiencing something that's incredibly, well, whatever, positive or negative. But I was like, for the craziness, like just to witness, wow, my mind is going nuts right now. Holy. And wow, my body, like that pit in the stomach, or maybe it's in your throat, or the heaviness in the chest. Just being with those sensations, taking care of the part of you that thinks there's a big problem is that is different than addressing the problem is one thing that happens in the mind. Addressing or taking care of the part of me that thinks there's a problem, that brings me into the present moment. And that might sound a little bit like, what? That's so like a Zen book would have that. Like, what are you actually talking about, lady? And the answer is be with yourself and you'll find out. Be with the sensations in your body. Notice the sensations in your body. Notice those thoughts that are happening in the mind, and take care of the person that's having those thoughts.
So let me ask you, the silent retreat that you went to, was it an actual silent retreat? What I mean by that is, so when I spent time in the ashram, so for the first, I think, 2.5 weeks, I wasn't allowed to speak. Not from a subservient kind of way, but and it taught me, don't say anything unless you actually have something important to say. Well, most people don't realize.
Which most people should do.
It's because like generally what it is that your voice has a lot of power because you're starting to announce what you're really at a current state. Because like you could see there's certain people that are just talking to talk, and like a lot of the times it doesn't necessarily make any sense, and you're kind of like, well, what exactly are you talking about? They want to project that, hey, I'm in here. But like you were talking about before in nature, it's crazy because Netflix just put out this chimpanzee, the Chimp Empire documentary, and I was like watched all 4 episodes of it last night. The only time they start vocalizing is when there's one, a threat, or two, an assertion of power. Other than that, they're completely communicating through silence and their actions. And you brought up the news fact, like again, the news is just noise. It's trying to get a lot of people riled up for no apparent reason or fearful or whatever. But in that moment of complete silence, you're able to internalize and you're able to like kind of reflect on what's happening around you. And then if you actually have something to say, you can say it at that point. And at that, when you're talking less, when you do speak, it holds a lot more value and a lot more power. So I completely understand and relate to what you're talking about because yeah, I've been through that. People look at me as like the quiet guy, and when I do talk, they kind of like, wait, what did he just say?
I can absolutely relate. And no one thinks of me as the quiet guy. With that though, I don't remember, maybe one of you does, who said, before you speak, consider, and here's the quote, is it kind, is it necessary, and is it true?
Socrates says something similar to that, but I don't know exactly who it was.
That is the takeaway from the retreat, just not talking, and that included no eye contact, no communication of any kind. It was to be completely and totally with me and notice how much I wanted to say something. And so the practice of witnessing what's happening in the mind is so revealing and interesting. And the reason it's important, and we're talking about this now when it comes to wellness, is we can separate, we can distinguish from that mind and me. So when I notice, oh, the mind is, I don't even say my mind, the mind. It's not me. It's 95 to 99% subconscious. That means that I don't even take responsibility for those thoughts. I didn't think them. The 95 to 99% subconscious did. The beautiful part is it is my responsibility. My responsibility is to respond to the thoughts. So in order to respond to my thoughts, I must notice the thought first, not just immediately agree, but notice, is that true for me? Oh, that's actually Dad's thought. That's culture's thought.
Yeah.
That's not even me. Does that align
Exactly.
with my values? Does that align with me? And these are also really powerful tools, because noticing that actually I don't think that, or I partly think that and I partly don't think that, is the reflection of what is causing the stress and the imbalance and the lack of clarity and calm and coherence that is in the present moment. So noticing, it's called cognitive dissonance, which is when I want to eat the burger and the fries and have another burger after, and I also really want to not have heartburn after, and I would rather actually eat something healthy. So the desire to have something and also not have something, the desire to have a thought and have a completely contradictory thought at the exact same time, that is extremely stressful. And I think that, coming back to your question, AJ, about what's happening in the West, I have a hunch that many of us feel disconnected from the reality around us. There's so many shoulds around us, and we think them to be true because we were raised with that. But there is some part of us within us that's like, that doesn't feel good for me. That doesn't sit well in me. And that cognitive dissonance causes stress.
One of the analogies I was thinking about as you both were talking is the difference in going to the airport, of all places, but the difference between the people mover and the people who just walk on the side of the people mover. And then you have the people on the people mover who are walking faster than the people mover. So, so what are we trying to catch up to? and to get to, but then sometimes the people on the people mover will look at the people off the people mover who are just taking their time. They're going to get to their gate or get to their baggage claim, and they are just in a sense, almost like a sense of peace. I don't have to rush anywhere. I can do this at my own pace. I'm not going to be dictated by everything else around me. It took me directly to probably LAX or DFW or YVR in the moment, in seeing those people movers and the three choices of how people navigate them. Either they walk at their own pace, they just get on the people mover and stand and let the people mover take them to where they want to be, or the other people who take the people mover and walk at a fast pace on the people mover to get wherever. It's very interesting. It's very
That's
interesting.
an excellent analogy. I'm going to borrow that, Nicole. I absolutely love that. Yes.
Of course. AJ, what were you going to say?
I was going to say, like, if you want to counteract or kind of move away from what's happening right now with society, a lot of people look at Hinduism as a religion because there are people out there trying to create a religion or something or another out of something. But the Puranas are basically teachings. They're allegorical stories that kind of help you reflect on what you could be. And it doesn't necessarily mean the wealthiest person on the planet, but look at the Puranas. If you want to kind of get an understanding of what humanity was meant to be, socially, in yourself, spiritually, or if you just want to try to understand what being happy is.
I think it's really important for all of us to kind of tune in. And maybe that means to look outwards, to read different texts from different faiths, from different paths, and notice which ones align. Which one do you read and go, oh, yes, that aligns? Or noticing what pieces, like this quote, this principle in life really hits home for me. And I noticed that my tummy relaxed when I read this. Oh, I don't have to do what everybody else thinks I should do. And that is how we can integrate what aligns for us. And the body will teach you. The body will show you. You'll feel it in your physical body when something is a yes for you. And what I find is the less that I am trying to figure out who I am, and the more I'm removing what I'm not, I notice who I am. So it's not that I need to become anything. It's actually that I can just unlearn some of the mistruths. I can notice, oh, that's a subconscious thought based on a reality that's not actually real. And I'm in a state of freedom and clarity in that moment. Being with ourselves, with what we're feeling in our physical body, teaches us how to navigate, teaches us what those in the East, as you were explaining, seem to have figured out. Because it seems that the car and the house aren't doing what we think that we were told they were going to do. I just decided to sell my condo and move to a very small town. I feel like I'm in like the Gilmore Girls community. I feel like I've stepped into a Hallmark movie in this lovely little town, this little community called Ladysmith on Vancouver Island in British Columbia in Canada. And I live in, there's a forest. I'm in a forest. Yeah. And I'm like, this is incredible. Mm-hmm. And yet in the past, there would have been times where I would have been bored. Now I sit with the boredom. And what I find is right underneath the boredom, which is under the busy and the chaos that I'm used to, and that culture encourages us to be activated. And when I sit beneath that in the boredom long enough with kindness, not to force myself, but just to kindly be with myself and take care of the part of me that doesn't like feeling bored. Underneath that is peace.
That's so good. That's so good. I would say that, first of all, I'm a little envious that you're up there because you mentioned the forest and just the idea of forest bathing. I went to the park the other week and it was the perfect time. It was clean and fresh. And to say that in Southern California is like, what? But I could breathe, and I realized, oh, the trees are really doing their job today. I felt it. I could be in that moment, which you're talking about, and see everything. I could hear every bird. It takes mindfulness to choose to be in the moment. The other thing that often comes to mind is we don't embrace silence. Granted, I know this is a podcast, so please, now is not the time to turn off the podcast and embrace silence.
Listen
You can
up,
do
folks.
that. You can do that after this podcast episode. But there's almost this need to be around constant noise in the car, coming in, the TV is on, the radio is on, and not embracing moments of silence throughout your day. I'm fortunate that I can have that. And you think about people who are in work environments, which is part of the reason why I think so many people enjoy remote work. They don't have to be in an office hearing everything, hearing all their coworkers are on the phone and there's all this chatter. And then there's coffee mugs clinking, the water cooler, all of these various sounds, and they get accustomed to it. So going into the silence, they feel like they're wrong or they're in the wrong place, when in actuality, the silence is the right place, and it can help you navigate when you are in those moments of a lot of noise.
It's understanding who you are. And then once you find that happiness in yourself, you can start moving towards what you're meant to be in life. You're not going to ever know that up until probably your deathbed. Hell, you might not even know until then. Live in the moment. Understand what that moment is.
One of the things that comes to mind there is this idea of belonging. And I love, excuse me, I love taking a word like the idea of belonging. Perhaps to belong is we're longing to just be. And that is the belonging. It's not to become anything. It's not to achieve anything. The sense of belonging happens from being with and taking care of the part of us that doesn't feel like it has what it needs. And so if there's one takeaway when it comes to wellness, what I would invite is every time that you notice that something is wrong, of course, that in itself is a concept, so it's in the mind.
Mm-hmm.
Every time we recognize or we believe or we think something is wrong, take care of the part of you that thinks something's wrong. So instead of addressing the plot in the movie of your life, sit back in your seat and remember that you're watching a movie. Take the view of recognizing, wow, I'm really struggling right now. Who noticed that someone else is struggling right now? That's mindfulness. So when I notice that I'm struggling, the noticer can take care of the I that's struggling. So there's there's the awareness of what we're experiencing, also known as consciousness in the mindfulness meditation world. And then there's this like human, this that has thoughts, emotions, and physical sensations. And the way that I see it is my truth, my consciousness, my higher self, my essence, my soul. I invite you to put whatever lingo aligns for you, is driving a car. And there's no one in the passenger seat. And in the back seat are the thoughts, emotions, and physical sensations. And they're always there. And it doesn't matter how much I crank up the music and open those windows to drown out the sounds of what's happening in the back seat. The thoughts, the emotions, and the physical sensations will be louder. I can shove pasta down there. I can throw a bottle of wine back there. I can get the most productive career and put that on top of there. They will actually affect how I feel, how well I am, and how this road trip is going to go. So it's my responsibility not to control the thoughts, emotions, and physical sensations, not to manipulate them, to fix them, to change them, to shut them up, to fling my hand around and whoever gets hit gets hit. It doesn't matter what my plan is. If I decide that I'm going to make it to LA before dark or veer away from it to stay on the outskirts, whatever my plan is, what's really going to affect the road trip is what's happening in the back seat. So it's my responsibility to respond, to pull the car over, to open up the back door and say, okay, what's going on? My responsibility, not to say, okay, you little shits, and teach them a lesson, but to actually say, like, talk to me, you have my attention, and then get quiet. And this is something that we have not been taught to do.
It really is the kids in the back seat saying, are we there yet? He's hitting me. She took my thing.
There's a lot of power in silence. I don't think people realize that. Are you willing to accept that, or do you want to just try to gain power through barking all the time?
I agree. And then how do we accept it? Be with it and notice the lack of acceptance, and take care of the part of you that refuses to accept it because it's not okay.
Well, who's saying it's not okay?
One of the kids in the back seat. It's our job as the driver of our own car to open up that back door to ourselves and say, what's happening? And that is what happens when we sit in silence. Those three kids sitting in silence is the same thing as pulling the car over, turning off the music, taking the key out, opening those back doors. And then, like, those kids just got really loud. Silence is not the same thing as quiet. When we sit in silence, we notice all of the sounds. We notice, like Nicole, you were saying, we notice the sounds of the birds. And we notice the sounds of that damn lawnmower. And so the awareness of, I've got a problem with the lawnmower, that's unacceptable in my reality. That's called a distraction in my meditation. Versus the birds are lovely. They're incorporated into my meditation. So the observer, the noticer of the judging, is recognizing and having compassion for the human state, the human condition, which is to judge. I always think of the mind as the ruler. And now the mind, of course, is all like, yeah, I'm the ruler. I rule everything. I'm in charge of everything. But in reality, it is a wooden measuring stick. It simply measures. I like this. I don't like this. I want this. I don't want that. This person's good. This person's bad. I'm good. I'm bad. So just watch it. Watch the mind. Yeah. Watch the mind. But it's so loud in our world with everything that's happening externally that in order to watch and notice that mind, it requires silence. And in order to feel comfortable enough to sit with the silence, we can use tools like smelling an essential oil, going out into the forest, connecting with a good friend, having that full connection to your body hug. Like, oh yeah, you see me. I am held in this moment. Oh, I'm safe.
We may need to define what we mean by silence, because I think people might, just like you were talking about, silence versus quiet. I don't think a lot of people would grasp that you're talking about silence within yourself. So you can hear all those other sounds and noises that are around you, right? Like, a lot of times when you're talking about silence, they just think everything needs to be quiet. And they use the example of the lawnmower. Well, that's distracting my silence. Well, no, that's part of your silence.
Yeah. What do you hear when you're quiet? Who's getting frustrated about the sound? How the part of you that doesn't accept that sound? It's loud. Yeah. You don't like it. Yeah. It's mind, mind, mind.
I was going to say something about the lawnmower as well. It's interesting because in that moment that you were talking about, Amy, I was thinking, to some people, the lawnmower is a distraction, but to others, the lawnmower brings up different responses, like, ooh, somebody's yard is about to be beautiful. The smell of cut grass, if you like it. So then it starts hitting some of those senses. What does it feel like when you walk by and you smell the cut grass? When you see that clean cut yard that was probably a bunch of weeds before, Or, hey, the dog has another place to go. Take care of their business. It can bring up so many other emotions. Some people can say, oh, that's horrible. It's loud. It's noisy. But then to others, ooh, somebody's cutting grass. It's how do you embrace it? It's a choice. One of the things I wanted to ask, Amy, I want to wrap this up because you've been with us for quite a while, and we definitely appreciate it. We started the podcast to address layoffs and to help people navigate through the job market. We know that's bringing up a lot of emotions. The expectation that people will contact them, they'll get the job, they'll be contacted for an interview. It's not happening on the basis that typically a lot of people have been accustomed to. I know we've talked about a lot of options, but what would you recommend people do to help manage their well-being, their mental health during this time that is challenging for so many?
Yeah, that's a great question. So one of the things that is always accessible is the senses. So what we see, smell, taste, touch, and hear. You can choose one of those. You don't have to remember all five in the moment of stress because we can't think clearly under stress. That makes sense. The body thinks that we're being chased by a bear. So you might use just feeling the back against your chair or your feet on the floor or on the chair or wherever they are. You might notice the hand, the feeling of your hand against your body and against the fabric of your clothes. So a sense of touch in this moment brings us into this moment. Also, we can incorporate, I'm an aromatherapist. I use essential oils a lot. I'm going to actually share something with you. What's really cool about essential oils, as a quick side note, as soon as we smell something, immediately the brain has an opinion. Mm-hmm. So we can smell something that we dislike and be brought into the present moment. We can smell something that we like and be brought into the present moment. We can smell something that we're neutral about and be brought into the present moment. So the key word is curiosity when it comes to the five senses and choosing whichever one resonates for you. Smell works for me. Taste. Maybe that's the taste of tea. Maybe it's the taste of a chocolate. The way that it becomes mindfulness is through awareness. Mindfulness means awareness. So it's very different than how I usually eat chocolate. It is to put the chocolate in my mouth, to notice the immediate sensations from it and how, oh my God, my mouth's watering right now. See, at the beginning of the conversation, we were talking about use the imagination. That's how quickly that happened. That was not a conscious choice. All I did was think of a chocolate melting in my mouth. And I'm like, where is it? Is it here? Where? I want it right now. And just to notice that, and don't let yourself chew. Just notice and savor that moment. We don't typically do this here. There's an example with taste. When you're washing the dishes, notice the sounds of the clinking. Notice the sounds of the lawnmower. Notice the sound of the fridge. Notice the sound of your neighbor's footsteps upstairs. Notice the sound of your dog yawning, sighing, snoring, barking. Notice it. Just notice. So what else have we got here? And then look, what are you looking at? Like just gaze out the window for a moment and just watch. I am still and I'm just taking in what I'm taking in. Maybe there's a tree. Maybe there's cars moving. Notice they're moving. I'm still. Just observe it. Smell. Obviously, I love essential oils. It's great to have an essential oil with me all the time. Cut open an orange. Make a cup of tea, friends. Smell that dried peppermint as that hot water is being poured over it. And as you bring it up, feel the heat. Notice the heat. Of course, you can feel it, but are we aware of it? Notice it. This activates the parasympathetic nervous system and takes us out of the stress state just by focusing on what is here right now. So we've got our touch, we've got smell, we've got taste, we've got sight, sound. So I guess I touched on that. So what are we hearing? And the mind will jump in with, I should put on that favorite song of mine. I should put on meditation music. I'm going to go and build a meditation room in my home. Thank the mind for its opinions. Thank the mind. That's its job. So we don't need to get mad at the mind. We don't need to turn those thoughts off. We need to work with them. Thank those kids in the back seat for their opinions. Make sure they have what they need. Ignoring them doesn't work. Thank them. If my back hurts, it's telling me to readjust. So I listen to it, and then it says, thank you. Or keep doing it, keep doing it, keep doing it. And I say, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you for the spasms, loud and clear. That's how my body speaks to me. And so I want to come back to that. So we can use any of these tools. And what I love about essential oils is when I smell a genuine and authentic essential oil that has been steam distilled from the plant material, is the biochemical compounds are as such that they are so tiny, the molecular structure, that, pardon me, just by breathing, just by smelling, remember, we just have to breathe. Smelling takes place on its own. We don't have to sniff or snort anything. We can just breathe and smelling is happening. And those essential oils actually travel right through the blood-brain barrier into the brain. And then they get into the bloodstream and they dance through the bloodstream for on average 6 to 8 hours before completely ridding themselves from the body. And they have, based on their biochemical compounds, it's not that I always say when people say, I believe in aromatherapy, I'm like, well, that's lovely. It's not a religion, though. It is, in fact, chemistry. And based on those biochemical compounds, we might have a calming effect, like the linalool constituent that's in lavender. In small amounts, lavender calms the nervous system. Large amounts, it's actually stimulating the brain. Just incorporating these tools, think of the 5 senses. And if you feel that you need to go rush out to buy an aromatherapy product, go to theblendingbar.ca. But more importantly,
yes,
on a serious note here, know that you don't need the essential oil. And here's the fact, here's the science, here's the story I was going to share about that. I did a project for a presentation for the Epilepsy Society of British Columbia. And there was a really cool study where they used jasmine essential oil, simple inhalation of jasmine essential oil for those who had epilepsy when they were having a seizure come on. And it was for when they felt the seizure coming on, they would smell jasmine. And it was a very high percentage, and I don't remember the amount, but it was something like 90-something% of people, when they smelt jasmine, it stopped the seizure from happening. That's really cool. Aromatherapy is awesome, neat science. Let's take it a step farther and come back to that idea of the mind and how important it is to be aware of our mind and what we put our focus on. We talked about imagination before. What they did is within the following 2 years, they followed these people, not in a weird, creepy way they followed. You know what I mean by the study.
Yeah.
They paid attention and checked in with them. And what happened is the people didn't even need to smell the oil when they felt a seizure coming on. All they needed to do was think about smelling jasmine, and the seizure stopped. When we can't experience what we're experiencing, what we want to be experiencing, when we can't arrive to the present moment, imagine it. Imagine eating that chocolate and you will start salivating, unless you don't like chocolate. You might feel nauseous suddenly. It's all the same thing. The body knows.
You and I connected talking about essential oils and aromatherapy. Orange is always going to be my favorite. And when we're talking about and bringing it back to this particular month that we're in, Mental Health Awareness Month, orange, citrus, that it's bright and shiny. I've gone through things in my life that with my diffuser, let's put some orange in there. Let's put grapefruit. People don't think about grapefruit. It's awesome. One of the things that Amy mentioned it, and I want others to be aware of it, but please go visit her online store to learn about essential oils, yoga, meditation, breath work, all of the above. And it's theblendingbar.ca. And because of technology, you offer a lot of things via virtual. Thank you so much for joining us today. This has been amazing. I think the way I navigate the world is a little bit different, thanks to you. So thank you. It's been a joy.
I love it. Well, thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure and great to reconnect with you and to meet you, AJ. If either of you and or your listeners want to connect about maybe a private wellness coaching consulting session, feel free to reach out to me. We can have a free Zoom chat and connect and explore some options there. There's lots to unpack, and I'm here.
Having Amy on the podcast was truly a breath of fresh air, pun intended. She gave us so much food for thought as we became more aware of being present and in the moment. But look, I couldn't let a wellness guru be on the podcast without asking for a meditation exercise. In our bonus episode, Amy takes us through a 14-minute meditation experience. Please download it and use it often. I know I will. As always, make sure you like, follow, and subscribe to Tip That Scale. And don't miss the content we share on Instagram and Twitter. We recently posted a video from an incredible content creator talking about something that you may be familiar with. Make sure you check it out.